Dawn at Fort Lincoln Military Base always arrived with the same quiet precision. The pale Nevada sun creeping over the barracks, the first shouts of drill sergeants echoing across the parade grounds, the metallic clang of the flagpole chain as Old Glory was hoisted into the morning sky. And then, like clockwork, he would appear. Aaron Mitchell. 72 years old, his back slightly bent but his movement steady, he emerged from the morning mist like a ghost from another era. Dressed in a faded canvas jacket and work boots worn thin by decades of use, he carried only three things: a push broom with a splintered wooden handle, a rusted bucket of supplies, and a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the noise of the bustling base around him. The soldiers barely noticed him. To them, he was just part of the scenery, the old man who swept the sidewalks outside the east gate, methodically clearing away leaves and litter with the same rhythmic strokes, day after day. Some of the younger privates chuckled behind his back, calling him the base mascot, or that crazy old guy who thinks he's still in the army. A few tossed gum wrappers just to watch him bend and pick them up, as if his quiet labor were some kind of joke. But if they had paused long enough to really look at him, they might have noticed the way his spine straightened ever so slightly when the bugle played at reveille. The way his hands, gnarled and scarred, moved with the deliberate precision of a man who had once given orders rather than taken them. The way his eyes, sharp beneath the brim of his weathered cap, flicked toward every passing military vehicle, searching for something, or someone, no one else could see. Only one person seemed to notice. Private First Class Jason Miller, a soft-spoken kid from Ohio with an observer's eye, had once caught the old man standing perfectly still at dawn, staring at a small, creased photograph clutched in his calloused hands. The look on his face wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, something like waiting. Jason started leaving things for him. A bottle of water on a hot day. A steaming cup of coffee placed quietly on the bench. No words exchanged, just a nod, the kind of silent acknowledgement soldiers give one another in the field. The others laughed. Why bother? He's just some homeless guy the MPs haven't kicked out yet. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the man with the broom was more than what he seemed. Because Aaron Mitchell didn't sweep like a janitor. He swept like a soldier still on duty. The desert wind carried secrets that morning, whispering through the chain-link fences of Fort Lincoln as Jason Miller crouched behind the base library's microfilm machine, his fingers trembling slightly against the dusty reels. It had started with a name, just a name half-remembered from a late-night training lecture months ago, scratching at the edges of his consciousness like a stubborn bullet casing lodged in his boot. Mitchell. Captain Aaron Mitchell. The photograph had been the first clue. That frigid dawn when a gust of wind tore open the old man's jacket, Jason had seen it. A faded name tape stitched inside the lining, the letters nearly eroded by time but still legible, Mitchell. Then came the metal box, spilling its contents onto the concrete with a sound like falling metals. The silver star, its ribbon brittle with age. The singed patch with lettering that made Jason's breath hitch. Special Recon Thunderline. Now hunched over yellowed mission reports in the base archives, Jason felt the puzzle pieces click together with terrifying clarity. Operation Thunderline. 1977. Southeast Asia. The file was thin, deliberately so, he suspected, with whole paragraphs blacked out by censor's ink. But the bones of the story remained. An extraction mission gone catastrophically wrong, 7 survivors, 1 commander left behind. Presumed Kia. No body recovered. The attached photograph showed 8 men standing before a helicopter, their faces young and unbroken, their uniforms streaked with soot. Jason's thumb hovered over one figure at the center, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that time and hardship hadn't yet eroded. The same jawline now hidden beneath Aaron Mitchell's grizzled beard. Looking for ghosts, Private? Jason nearly knocked over his coffee as Sergeant Toller loomed behind him, his smirk fading when he saw the documents spread across the table. That janitor? Jason's voice cracked. Sir, I think he's Captain Mitchell. From Thunderline. The sergeant's face went carefully blank, the way soldiers learn to mask shock. That's a hell of an accusation. That mission was classified to oblivion. But you've heard of it. Pause. Then quieter, everyone in Spec Ops has. It's what they use to teach recruits about operational failure. Toller dragged a finger across the redacted file. They sent those boys into a meat grinder. Only reason anyone came back was because their CO stayed behind to lay covering fire. His eyes flicked to the window, where Aaron's silhouette moved methodically along the fence line. You're telling me that broom-pushing old man is? The library door burst open before he could finish. Corporal Rodriguez stood panting, his face flushed with urgency. Miller. You need to see this. General Hawthorne's convoy just rolled through the gate. Jason's stomach dropped. Four-star General Richard Hawthorne, the youngest lieutenant to survive Thunderline, now legend. The man whose memoirs never mentioned the name of the officer who'd saved his life, because the army had declared that officer dead. And yet, as Jason sprinted toward the commotion gathering at the east gate, one terrible, glorious truth became undeniable. Aaron Mitchell hadn't just been sweeping sidewalks all these years. He'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to finally recognize the soldier still standing at his post. The new security orders had come down like gospel that morning. No more civilian presence within 50 feet of the perimeter, no exceptions. The MPs approached Aaron with polite but firm professionalism, their polished boots crunching on the gravel he'd just swept clean. "Sir, I'm afraid you'll need to move along," the younger one said, his hand resting lightly on his belt, not near his sidearm but close enough to remind everyone present where the authority lay. Aaron didn't protest. 40 years of living in the shadows had taught him the futility of arguing with orders. He simply nodded, that same slight dip of the chin he'd once used to acknowledge reports from his men, and bent to gather his things. The broom. The bucket. The old satchel that had followed him through jungles and prison camps and halfway across the world to this very spot. Then fate intervened with the sharp, ringing clatter of metal on concrete. The small box tumbled from his satchel as he lifted it, its lid springing open upon impact like Pandora's chest of military secrets. The silver star skittered across the pavement first, its tarnished surface still catching the morning light with stubborn pride. Then came the unit patch, its edges burned black in a pattern that told anyone who knew how to read it exactly what kind of fire its wearer had survived. But it was the photograph that froze time. 8 young men, frozen in the split second before disaster. The helicopter behind them already engulfed in flames the camera couldn't capture, but every veteran in the vicinity could smell just by looking at the image. 7 faces Jason recognized from history books. And one, the officer at the center, his hand raised not in farewell but in a clear go motion that matched perfectly with the weathered features of the man now kneeling to collect his scattered past. "Oh my God." The whisper came from Rodriguez, the logistics clerk who'd been walking past with a clipboard. His voice cracked like a teenager's despite his 30 years. That's Thunderline. That's the bird that never made it out." Jason arrived just in time to see Aaron's hands, those steady, broom-pushing hands, tremble for the first time as they closed around the photograph. The old man's lips moved silently, forming names that hadn't been spoken aloud in decades. Names the army had etched onto memorials and then forgotten. "Sir," Jason breathed, crouching beside him, suddenly aware he was witnessing something sacred. "Were you there?" "At Thunderline." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of diesel and desert sage as Aaron finally lifted his gaze. Not to Jason. Not to the growing crowd of stunned soldiers. But to someone, approaching from beyond the gate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every unsaluted dawn, every unacknowledged sacrifice, every silent year spent waiting to be seen. "Not everyone came home," he said softly. "But someone had to stay behind to make sure the others did." And then the black SUV with government plates rolled to a stop, its door opening to reveal General Richard Hawthorne's ashen face. A man confronting a ghost from his past, standing not in dress uniform but in worn work clothes, holding not a rifle but a broom. The moment stretched, taut as a tripwire. Then the general removed his cap with hands that shook nearly as much as Aaron's. And the entire base held its breath. Time didn't so much stop as fracture into jagged pieces that morning at Fort Lincoln. The desert wind still blew. The flag still snapped on its pole. But every soldier within sight of the east gate became a statue, their collective breath trapped somewhere between shock and awe. General Richard Hawthorne, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, rows of medals testifying to a lifetime of command, stood frozen mid-step, his polished dress shoes inches from the cracked sidewalk where Aaron Mitchell knelt. The general's face, normally an impenetrable mask of military discipline, collapsed through decades of hardened composure in an instant. His lips formed a name no one had spoken on this base in 46 years. "Captain Mitchell?" The words came out cracked, barely audible, the voice of the 23-year-old lieutenant who had watched his commanding officer stay behind to face certain death rather than let his men perish. Aaron rose slowly, his joints protesting with the aches of age and old wounds, but his spine straightened into the unmistakable posture of an officer. His eyes, those quiet, watchful eyes that had scanned these same gates every morning, locked onto Hawthorne's with an intensity that made younger soldiers instinctively step back. No one moved. No one breathed. Somewhere in the distance, A truck engine stuttered to a stop as if even machines understood the gravity of this moment. Then General Hawthorne did something no one had ever witnessed. He removed his cap with ceremonial slowness, pressing it against his chest where 5 battle stars and 2 purple hearts glittered. His right hand, the one that had signed orders sending thousands into combat, rose in a perfect salute, trembling only slightly at the fingertips. "I watched your helicopter take off," Aaron said, his voice rough with memories of smoke and gunfire. 7 souls made it out. A tear tracked through the general's close-cropped stubble. Because one stayed behind. Around them the spell broke in waves. First the MPs, then the gathering crowd of privates and corporals, finally the cluster of senior officers who had rushed from headquarters. All came to attention as understanding rippled through the ranks. This wasn't just some eccentric janitor. This was Captain Aaron Mitchell. Presumed dead. Erased from records. Standing before them as solid as the flagpole he'd guarded every dawn. The base commander, Colonel Rohr, paled as the implications hit him. "General, surely this can't." Silence. Hawthorne's voice cracked like a whip, never breaking eye contact with Aaron. "This man held an enemy battalion at bay for 3 hours with nothing but an M16 and 2 grenades so we could evacuate the wounded. That sidewalk he's been sweeping?" The general's gesture took in the immaculate pavement. "He's walked more honorable patrols in retirement than most of your men do in active service." A young specialist fainted near the guard shack. No one laughed. Aaron reached into his jacket with deliberate slowness, producing the faded photograph. The general's breath hitched when he saw it. 8 faces, forever young, frozen in the last moment before hell opened its jaws. "You kept this all these years?" Hawthorne whispered. "Kept more than that," Aaron replied, tapping his temple. Then, with the ghost of a smile, "Though the army seems to have misplaced my file." The laugh that burst from the general sounded more like a sob. Around them, saluting hands began to shake, not from fatigue, but from the overwhelming understanding that they were witnessing something far beyond a simple reunion. This was justice, decades late. Delivered not by a tribunal or a medal ceremony, but by a broom, a photograph, and the unbreakable bond between soldiers who had stared into the same abyss. And as the sun climbed higher over Fort Lincoln, glinting off the silver star still lying on the pavement between them, one truth became undeniable. The army might have forgotten Captain Aaron Mitchell. But his men never did. The bench outside the base commander's office had never hosted such an unlikely pair. The 4-star general in his immaculate dress greens, and the janitor in clothes washed so thin the desert sun shone through them. Between them sat a bottle of bourbon, 2 paper cups, and 46 years of unanswered questions. Aaron's voice, when he finally spoke, carried the quiet precision of a man who had long ago rationed his words like water in the desert. "They told you I died." Not a question. A simple statement of fact. Hawthorne's knuckles whitened around his cup. "We circled for 20 minutes. Smoke everywhere. No radio contact. Then the fuel warning came on." The general's voice broke like a cadet's on his first tour. "Command listed you as MIA. Ben Kia. We had a memorial with an empty casket." A breeze carried the scent of gun oil from the nearby range as Aaron's gaze drifted to the horizon where the desert met the sky, the same way it had in that jungle so long ago. "I woke up at the bottom of a ravine," he said as if describing someone else's nightmare. "Leg broken. Rifle gone. Could hear them hunting survivors in the trees above." His fingers traced the scar along his ribs that no one had ever asked about. "Took out 3 before they overwhelmed me." The bourbon sat untouched as he spoke of 2 years in a bamboo cage no taller than a man's knees. Of dysentery that left him lighter than his rifle had been. Of the interrogations where he gave nothing but name, rank, and serial number, even when they stopped believing he was military at all. "By the time the prisoner exchange happened," Aaron continued, "I didn't look like anyone's idea of an American officer. More skeleton than man." His chuckle held no mirth. The debriefing doctor took one look at me and wrote, "Probable civilian contractor," in his notes. Hawthorne's face darkened with dawning horror. They didn't verify. No dental records for Spec Ops in 77. No DNA then. And Mitchell. Aaron tapped his temple. Wasn't all there for a long while after. Just another broken vet in a broken system. The sun climbed higher, baking the truth into their bones. How VA psychiatrists had diagnosed him with combat-induced amnesia when he couldn't recall his own unit. How discharge papers got misfiled under Matthew instead of Aaron. How the man who had once commanded elite operatives became just another social security number in an overwhelmed bureaucracy. When the memories came back, Aaron said softly, I went to Fort Bragg first. But my unit. He didn't need to finish. The disbanded units, the reassigned comrades, the classified operations no one would confirm existed. They built a perfect maze with no way home. Hawthorne's tears fell now, splashing on metals that suddenly seemed meaningless. All these years, sweeping sidewalks outside bases. Not just sweeping. Aaron's smile held the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd kept his oath long after his country forgot it. Watching. Making sure the flag went up every morning. That's all I ever wanted, to know the things we fought for still stood. In the terrible silence that followed, both men stared at the photograph between them, 8 faces forever young. 7 had come home to parades and promotions. 1 had walked back alone, through layers of obscurity no enemy could have devised. The general's hand found Aaron's shoulder, gripping the frayed fabric like a lifeline. You're coming home now. Properly. But Aaron's gaze was already drifting toward the flagpole, where a new shift of soldiers were preparing for evening colors. His voice, when it came, held the peaceful resolve of a man who'd made his choices long ago. General, he said gently, I never left. The ceremony they threw for Aaron Mitchell should have been the end of the story. The Pentagon dispatched a full honor guard. The Secretary of Defense offered a public apology. Back pay totaling 46 years of service appeared in a bank account he never checked. They pressed a new uniform into his hands, the captain's bars gleaming like they'd been waiting for him all along. But true soldiers don't retire when the paperwork says they can. At 0530 the next morning, long before the generals woke in their VIP quarters, Aaron appeared at the East Gate as always. Not in dress blues but in his faded work clothes. Not carrying medals but his old push broom. The MPs snapped to attention anyway, their salutes cutting through the dawn air like blades. Aaron simply nodded and began his rounds. The children came first, base kids who'd heard the legend from wide-eyed parents. They clustered near the flagpole in pajamas and winter coats, watching as the man who'd been a janitor, but also a ghost, but also a hero, moved with the same deliberate care he always had. When he caught a second grader named Emily mimicking his sweeping motions with a toy broom, he didn't give a speech. He just handed her a real one, sized for her small hands. Every stripe on that flag, he told her, pointing upward as colors was called, was earned by someone who didn't get to see it fly. By week's end, the morning ritual had become something sacred. Cadets from the academy 30 miles west began arriving at 0500, lining the sidewalks not to gawk, but to sweep alongside him. The base commander's wife started a Breakfast with Heroes program where kindergartners ate pancakes at the guard shack while Aaron taught them how to fold a flag properly, his gnarled fingers moving with muscle memory no amount of amnesia could erase. The real change came when General Hawthorne, during his final base inspection before retirement, noticed Private Jenkins, a troublemaker who'd been on the verge of discharge, standing ramrod straight at the fence line at dawn. Not smoking, not scowling, but watching Aaron Mitchell raise the colors with tears streaming down his face. Captain Mitchell's the reason I re-upped, Jenkins confessed when questioned. Said if he could serve 40 years without anyone noticing, I can damn well serve 4. Hawthorne took the observation back to Washington. Within months, the Mitchell Protocol became standard across all branches, a radical new approach to tracking MIA cases that combined DNA registries with annual memorial audits. The VA established a 24/7 verification hotline after Aaron's story inspired Congress to fund facial recognition software for aging veterans. But the truest testament came on the morning of Aaron's 80th birthday, when 7 military bases across 3 time zones synchronized their flag ceremonies to the exact minute he raised the colors at Fort Lincoln. No order had been given. No memo circulated. The officers in charge simply knew, some from personal encounters, others from the legend that had grown in the telling, that certain traditions outrank even generals. When Aaron passed quietly in his sleep 5 years later, they found 3 things on his bedside table: the photograph from Thunderline, his original silver star, and a note in handwriting that shook only slightly with age. Plant me where I can see the flag. They did better than that. They buried him at the base of the East Gate flagpole, his headstone facing the rising sun. And every morning at 0600, whether in blazing heat or driving snow, a different soldier takes up his broom to clear the path before colors, a ritual that spread to every installation that heard the story. Because Aaron Mitchell taught them all a final, unshakable truth. Greatness isn't measured in who notices your service, but in how long you keep serving when no one does.